Well, welcome everybody to another Ceph month, week 2, and this time we're going to have a Rados Gateway update with Casey, and then followed by we have two birds of a feather session, one on the Ceph Research and Scientific Computing Group, as well as the Go Ceph Get Together, which is the Go APIs for Ceph. So, Casey, will you please take it away for the first presentation for week 2?
Gladly. Thanks, Mike. As promised, here's the RGW update. Thanks for coming. Just kidding. We got a lot of cool feature development on the roadmap. First up is S3 Select. This was new in Pacific, supporting SQL-like queries against objects in CSV format. For Quincy, though, we're filling out support for the query types and functions, and also working on support for the Parquet format, which should allow some extra optimizations. For example, moving some of the query execution into OSDs so they can run in parallel and RGW doesn't have to read all of the data. Gal and team are doing great work there. Also looking at S3 bucket inventory to help manage listing and searches of very large buckets that are slow and expensive to list. So a background process just builds an index of these large buckets in a convenient and cheap format to read. So it kind of trades some of the consistency from our bucket index for performance. Also SSE S3 bucket encryption. This is transparent policy-based object encryption in RGW. And unlike the existing flavors, SSEC and SSEKMS, this can encrypt objects without the client requesting it on upload. So we recently started a collaboration with some engineers from Flipkart, and we're excited to see progress here. Also request rate limiting per user and bucket. We've got a proof of concept for this working, so expect to see that in Quincy. We've also been working on some data caching projects with Mass Open Cloud with the goal of accelerating workloads with some local data caching. And we're also planning to build on Jaeger tracing support in RGW and use it to do some performance evaluation and optimization work. Next, introducing Project Zipper, which is a project led by Dan Grinowitz, where we've built an abstraction in RGW for the Librados backend. So the goal is to let us plug in other non-Rados backends or stack layers on top of the Rados backend. One of the cool ideas is to have a policy layer that enables some Lua scripting to control how requests are processed before they get written out to Rados. And this interface also can be really useful for some benchmarking and performance work where we drive a workload just against specific parts of the interface. Or if we have like an in-memory backend, then we can do benchmarking on the front-end code without the overhead of writes to Rados. So a lot of opportunities from Project Zipper on the horizon. And last, multi-site, a lot of work in progress here. Mainly dynamic resharding support, which has been a long time coming. We've built up a team of developers to help with that, and they're doing amazing. Also, lifecycle transitions to the cloud. This is built on Yehuda's work for storage classes and lifecycle transitions, and allows you to tier objects to an S3 external service. And lastly, sync from cloud. Yehuda's working on support for identifying changes in S3 so that they can be replicated back into Ceph. via multi-site. So that's all I've got. I'm happy to take questions.
Hey Casey, this is Prasad from Flipkart. So that's an impressive set of features. So was just keen about S3 select support and bucket inventory and rate limit. We have a in Flipkart we have an internal rate limit infrastructure which is a patch on top of RGW but with a lot of limitations. So I was wondering how what would be um, what's the optimize about this rate limiting? I mean, is it based on the DM clock? Is it a moving window? And what are the contours of this feature? I mean, how does it?
Yeah, good question. So we had been looking at distributed rate limiting so that the cluster as a whole could give a consistent rate. But I think we're going to just go with a per RGW one, which is a lot easier to implement. So it's not based on DM clock, and it's just going to be per RGW for now.
Okay, and with a sliding window or fixed window time slices, and it's possible to get a spiky pattern in terms of requests.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure how it works.
Okay.
I am eager to learn more.
Fine, because like I said, we have a internal implementation which is again on RGW itself, but we, to be honest, we aren't very happy with it because of it's not a distributed rate limiter. It's on a per Rados gateway, and it's a fixed window protocol. So the windows like if you set a rate limit on a per minute basis, then it's possible to front load all the requests at the start of the minute and then see get a sawtooth sort of a pattern. So
Yeah.
those are some of the problems that we have. And with respect to S3 Select, we would be having support for only those features which AWS S3 already supports, right? Like the SQL querying or the JSON or the CSV parser.
That's my understanding, that it's the intent is to be AWS compatible.
Okay. Would we be open to having more functions which are not AWS S3, which are not provided by AWS S3, but which is something that the RGW can handle?
Yeah, I don't see why not.
Okay. One of the things that we were contemplating, although we are not going to work, is to be able to select a single page out of a multi-page PDF. Yeah, just a stray thought. It's not something that we paid serious attention to, but I thought it might, in where the objects are actually huge documents and multi-page documents. If we could just extract on a per page basis, I thought it might make sense.
Interesting. Yeah, I think there are a lot of cool applications for this.
Another question that came in chat, is it planned to test Project Zipper against two backends with Ceph clusters?
Two different Rados backends, you're saying?
And they just say two backend Ceph clusters, so I'm guessing yes.
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, because currently we are using in some clusters NFS Ganesha to access the object data. And we are wondering if it's possible to connect two different Ceph clusters and connect them with Project Zipper to one Rados gateway and then serve data through NFS Ganesha.
I don't think that's one of the use cases that we were thinking about, but it would definitely be possible. One of the ideas that we had was to support kind of tiering to other clouds. So you might store a copy locally to the Rados database, then also mirror it somewhere else. So I could see that working with two Rados backends similarly.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, that's good information for us.
I had a couple quick questions about some gaps that I ran into. One question is around the Ganesha export support. Looking at what's documented right now, it looks like it only supports exporting buckets when multi-site isn't enabled. There isn't a way to like specify which zone, not which zone, but which realm the bucket that you're trying to export exists. Do you know if is that a known gap, or is that a documentation issue, or me being confused issue? And or do you know who I should go talk to?
So the librgw, which is loaded by NFS Ganesha, would run under the context of a zone, and so it could only export buckets from the realm that zone is in.
Okay. And is there a single instance of that per Ganesha?
Probably.
Okay. So the daemon would probably be tied to that zone. Okay. But in principle, it should work with even in a multi-site situation.
Agreed, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Is Dan the right person to talk to about the details there?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know? Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Okay.
And, another question that came into chat, does data caching still foresee to use Nginx caching, or would it be internal to the Rados gateway?
These projects are internal, yeah. I would love to hear people's experiences with the Nginx cache, though.
Enrico, do you want to elaborate a little more?
Yeah, can you hear me first?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So yeah, I was just curious about this because actually I'm from CERN. We are still running Nautilus for our S3 clusters. So at the moment we have no caching in between, but we are planning to upgrade our Ceph version. So I know that in the next one, the Nginx caching layer would be supported. But then from my understanding, this new data caching would be something implemented on the Rados gateway itself. So can you maybe expand a bit more on that? Would we be able to leverage and take advantage of this caching just addressing the Rados gateway without any other reverse proxy in between?
Yeah, that's definitely the goal. So the first step is just having RGW cache data locally, but there's another layer to this research project, a level 2, which is basically localized caching. So some objects would be placed or pinned to a specific RGW for the cache, and there would be redirects to get to the right cache.
I see. Well, at the moment, I cannot really report our experience for what concerns the Nginx cache because, as I said, unfortunately, we cannot use it at the moment. Just another quick question. I might have missed it at the very beginning. Are these new feature coming to Pacific, or you foresee these to be also backported or are for future releases?
Most of this is for the next Quincy release, but I believe that the first round of data cache work will be backported to Pacific. That's the
okay.
plan.
Okay, good to know. Thanks.
being a +1 for the Nginx caching as well. Oh, go ahead, Sage.
Yeah, I had a question about some of the zipper stuff with the non-Rados backends. It feels like we have a whole sort of slew of different scenarios that we're looking at here. And with the local database for the metadata being one of the first ones. Just to make sure I'm understanding sort of what this initial target is, this is basically the local zone metadata being stored. Is it like SQLite or something like that?
SQLite, yes.
Okay. So this would, the constraints there would be that you'd have a single daemon instance for that zone. And it would, those would make sense for like an edge deployment or something like that. Is that right?
Yeah, and I'm not even sure that the database backend would be something that we productize and support. I think it's more of a proof of concept to get the interfaces right.
Right. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I mean that makes sense as a development milestone. I think there are edge scenarios where it might make sense too, where you have a larger deployment in the cloud or in your data center or whatever, but then you have a bunch of edge sites that are producing data and just want to like write things locally initially and then use multi-site to sync them out. I wouldn't discard that completely. I think the thing that I wonder about that scenario, though, once that you start thinking about what it would look like in production, is it seems like there would be a bunch of other of additional other steps that would be necessary to make the Rados gateway run without sort of a Ceph cluster that's there with the way that the Ceph configs are managed, or all the random things that we do where we talk to the monitor or their sort of runtime state.
Yeah, agreed. And I don't really see the Ceph cluster ever going away, at least personally. So I think we'll always talk to monitors and use Ceph config even if the backend is not Rados.
Yeah. Okay.
Can be a very minimal Ceph cluster, right? Single host, single monitor on the edge. And if you're already there, then put just a single OSD and use that instead of the backend of the database backend.
Yeah.
One gap that the database backend has at the moment is it's got a problem with the idea of edge deployment is it doesn't support multi-site right now.
Okay. Is that just a matter of like having zipper interfaces for all the other metadata stores or something like that?
Yeah, the package index logging, all that stuff is not.
Yeah. Right.
Doesn't happen.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Well, I mean, if you have that like single mon, single OSD, single manager in place, then it isn't strictly necessary. It'd be more of an efficiency thing anyway.
Right.
Satisfy those use cases. That makes sense. Okay. Okay.
Thanks, Sage. Thanks, Yehuda.
One question. It's faster to say it than type it. It's Dan from CERN. I don't know if you mentioned, because I joined about 1 minute late, but in the past there were discussions that the index format, the binary, like using OMAP for indexes, might change in future release. Is that planned in the foreseeable future, or are the index formats stable as far as you can see?
We've definitely put a lot of thought into alternate indexing schemes, and they all tend to be very complicated. So I don't expect a new index format in Quincy. Past that, I'm optimistic.
Okay. I mean, I assume that for naive users, it would, if you do change that, this would be a kind of like online conversion type scenario, right? Or maybe new buckets would be. Okay, whatever. I guess you haven't thought about it too much at all, but.
Well, we have an abstraction for resharding that can track different types of indexes. So you could reshard from a bucket index in OMAP to some other format.
Good point. Yeah, that's true. Okay, cool. Thanks.
One other question on that resharding. Do we have an updated timeline on when that's expected? I guess obviously frequency, but for that particular piece is expected to be backported to Pacific, right?
We do have some of the reshard work in Pacific, but it's not really. It doesn't really change how resharding works, and it doesn't add support for any other index types.
Related to the multi-site resharding, the support.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah.
I don't believe that we're planning to backport that.
Okay. Just from a logistical perspective, that's sort of the big chunk that that a bunch of other pull requests are sort of waiting on, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Is there a sort of a expected timeline there?
It's still hard to say. We just recently got some reshard tests to pass, so we're making really good progress, but it's hard to know all of the bugs that we've yet to uncover. So it needs a lot more testing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, are there any other questions before we move along to our Birds of a Feather sessions? Okay. Let's see. Yes. Thank you, Casey, for the update and for answering all of our questions.